covered in this topic is the following. We are going to look at entrepreneurial qualities and success factors, a very easy topic. Transforming a business plan into an action plan. We're going to look at setting up or starting a business based on that action plan. Presentation of business information, and then introduction to human resource and the human resource function, and also team stages and dynamic theories, as well as conflict management. Now guys, before we continue with all of those topics that we are going to do, I just want you to take notice of the following things, because throughout we are going to refer to these things. You will see we've indicated the mark allocations for you as well. So just to give you an indication, if you see any of these verbs that we are going to discuss now, this is how it will be marked and the marks will be allocated. Right, we start off with lower order questions, and when you see any of the following verbs in a question, give, identify, list, mention, name or state, you will note that the mark allocation for most of those is only 1 mark each. It doesn't require any other interpretation or any other explanation whatsoever. It is just merely recalling from memory, and it will be allocated with 1 mark each. Just make sure that you follow your mark allocation that you will see on the right hand side of the question. Now guys, the following verbs are a bit more complicated. We are speaking about middle order verbs now, and it refers to things like classify, name, suggest, advise. Advise is a higher order question. Propose, define, outline, recommend, motivate, and state. Now guys, whenever you see one of those verbs, you can see some of them are 1 mark, some of them are 2 mark verbs. Those answers normally requires a double mark answer at the end. For things like recommend, for classification and all of those, we would actually need a full sentence where applicable, and the marks are allocated at the end of the sentence or the end of the term, because it's basic application things. Now the following verbs are a bit different, because in these verbs we would need you to make a statement and then follow up or explain that statement with what I call a qualifier, something that explains your original statement. Now guys, anything that starts with and, because, so that, and those kinds of things, that is when we are referring to statements. Right, so guys, have a look at these verbs. Describe, explain, distinguish, discuss, analyze, elaborate, showing impact, applying any form of a technique, evaluate, differentiate, compare or tabulate. Whenever you see any of those verbs, please do not write a small staccato sentence. Rather write a sentence like this and this and this, so that, because, and, because then we will know where the qualifier would be. A half a sentence will only give you 1 mark and not the double marks. There's a split mark method in marking this, and I see at the end of the year for the grade 12 national examinations that many of the learners, you can see they know their work, but they haven't qualified their statements and therefore only receive 1 mark out of the 2. And then for no reason whatsoever, the mark is actually half of what it should be. So please have a look for these verbs and make sure you structure your sentence correctly so that you can get 2 marks. Right, Mr. Edwards, I'm going to give over to you, because you are going to do the first section of work, and I think we're going to start with entrepreneurial qualities, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Zyl, and welcome to you grade 11s. I hope you're going to enjoy the session with us today and learn as much as possible. And as we're going through these sections, please keep in mind these questions, these verbs that we've been going through the last couple of minutes, because we're going to refer to them a few times as we're going through. Right, so let's start off with entrepreneurial qualities, okay? The type of question that you could come across. Let's have a look at this. This is in your little notebooks that you've got. The first question could be outline or explain the qualities of an entrepreneur. All right, and notice that that is a middle order question. Okay, so the outline aspect, if you're looking at how the marker is going to assess that question, they will provide full marks, which will be awarded for the correct responses and full sentences. And as Mr. Van Zyl referred to earlier, the split marking will be applied for the explain aspect.
Mr. Edwards, I just want to reiterate the outline one, although it says in your book there, but it's actually of no concern to you. Outline is actually a lower order question. You still need a full sentence, but we don't require a statement and a qualifier. What the marker will be looking for is the essence of the sentence, and that will be enough for 2 marks. So don't go and try and figure out, if you don't know, a very long qualifier, because it's not necessary in this particular question, only if it says outline.
All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a look at the memo that you could expect to get for this particular question, both for outline and explain. So let's have a look. So first and foremost, the outline the qualities of the entrepreneur. Full marks will be awarded at the end of the fact. So let's have a look at the answers that you could provide here. I'll just go through the first couple of answers. So also note the mark allocation that will be for a question like this. Probably maximum 8 marks, maybe around 6 marks as well. So you would need to have either 3 or 4 bullets. So let's have a look. The first one was the entrepreneur must be creative by identifying opportunities and challenges, challenging normal thinking. So then the 2 marks is provided at the end of that statement. The second one, the entrepreneur must have perseverance because it takes at least 5 years for a business to become established and generate a sufficient income. So in order to get the 2 marks, you do need to provide us with quite a lengthy statement. And just looking at the last one that we'll go through there, an entrepreneur needs to have a desire for excellence and to succeed in competitive situations.
Mr. Edwards, if you look at the outline question, remember, if I will split it for you now in an explain version of this. In outline, if the learner would have written, the entrepreneur must be creative by identifying opportunities, or just even say the entrepreneur must be creative, that would be enough for 2 marks. Because it's outline. Should it be an explain question, then the mark will be split, and you will get something like, the entrepreneur must be creative. That's 1 mark. That's your statement. Now I'm going to qualify the statement by saying, how must they be creative? By identifying opportunities and challenging normal thinking. That's your 2nd mark. But for outline, that first part of the sentence is fine. But now it didn't say list. If it said list and you said list the qualities of an entrepreneur and you wrote there creativity or perseverance, then that would have been 1 mark each. But now this question is outlined. So the sentence must be a full sentence. With other words, I can put a full stop to it and can stand on its own. That would be enough for 2 marks, because the essence there is the entrepreneur must be creative.
100%. So that leads us into the next slide, which is looking at the explain aspect. So the explain verb, right? As Mr. Van Zyl was referring to there, the statement. So let's have a look at the first bullet there. It says the entrepreneur must be creative. That's a statement. Okay. How can they be creative? By identifying opportunities and challenging normal thinking. So you can see the statement and the qualifier. Split marking will be applied for this type of question. Let's have a look at another example there. It says the entrepreneur must have perseverance because it takes at least 5 years for a business to become established and generate sufficient income. So you can see how a marker is now going to assess or mark this section of work slightly differently to the outline section. You'll see how you're required to provide further information in this respect. All right, so that's an example with regards to the qualities of an entrepreneur. Now, in this section, we move forward towards key success factors. All right, type of question that you could come across here, lower order and middle order questions. You'll see this in your booklet as well. It says state or name key success factors, and then identify key success factors. Note the verbs used here: state, name, and identify. So that will lead into the memo. You'll see the memo is allocating 1 mark per identifier, per success factor. So that will be outlined in the mark allocation that's been provided for you. So the answer for name key success factors: profitability, sustainability, know your market, customer base. That should be in your notes that you've also got. And there's no need for any explanation in this instance. You're just stating, naming, or identifying the success factors. All right. Now let's look at another section for the success factors. This is more of a higher order question. So you'll notice that the verb being used here is suggest. Okay, so in some instances here you can give your own personal knowledge of the content, and you can provide further details in this instance. So let's have a look at the options that you have over here. So you can refer to the following things like thorough planning needs to be put in place, sound managing of finances. Note the question was suggest strategies that the business can use to ensure that they remain profitable and sustainable. All right, so looking at things that can keep them around and sustainable over a longer period of time. Things like effective management of scarce resources and employees, maintaining a solid customer base. All right, so chances are this type of question will be slightly more marks allocated to this, so keep that in mind.
Mr. Edwards, also with suggest or recommend, these are the two main higher order questions that you get in business studies question papers, and it actually requires you to think critically. But a learner asked me today in the class, and it's maybe a nice discussion point, because I think there are sometimes many things that could be seen as unfair. Maybe this could be one of those. If you look at a grade 12 end of year exam paper, those things need to be the same for everybody. Everybody needs to be assessed according to the same paper, the same memo. So unfortunately, what you will get there, instead of this now being a critical question, it requires you to still memorize facts. That is why it says there, refer to the following. You can use your own brain by structuring the question or your answer. Refer only to those things. The strategy is, of course, something practical, but there is a set memo, and the marker will be looking to see if you apply some of those concepts in there. So if you go way off, then if it's not on the memo and I can't link it there, then I'm not allowed to give those marks. That's at the end of year grade 12, which we are preparing you for. So if there are anything in a core content note, old question paper, where you can regurgitate that answer, rather do that. But that doesn't mean that you should leave a question blank if I cannot remember what was in the core content notes or from an old question paper. Then you just think logically, structure your answer in a full sentence, and the marks will still be allocated at the end, as long as the essence is there for suggest as well.
Yeah, so take notes of what Mr. Van Zyl did say there. If there is the ability to link the statement to the memo, then it's possible that you will still get those marks that were allocated for that question. So keep that in mind. Do not leave a question blank. At least give it a go. All right, because if you are thinking critically, it's possible that you may be on the right track, and the answer that you provided could be linked to the memo that's on for the paper. All right, so that is the entrepreneurial qualities section of work. Very short section, quite an easy section if you're looking at the paper, quite an easy section to answer. So maybe a good one for you to get some good results for that section. All right, so let's move on to the next section, which is transform a business plan into an action plan. So we'll go through a couple of things in this section, talking about different graphical illustrations and that sort of thing that we use in order to assist us in planning. All right, so let's have a look at a type of question that you could come across in this section. So looking at discuss, explain, or describe the importance of an action plan. So you're looking at why is it important to put together an action plan. Note the verbs that are used here. All of them are referring to split marking. So you're going to have the statement and then the qualifier in this respect. So let's have a look at the memos that are provided. Okay, so this is actually in your book. So the importance of an action plan. Okay, so we're going to go through this step by step, all right, and see if you can give us the correct answers that you can implement in your books there. You can just put them in there. So let's have a look at the first one. So the importance of an action plan, it provides an opportunity for reflection. All right, so it looks at what you're doing and how you can go about taking the best out of this opportunity. All right, the next one, number 2, it brings individuals together. So the bullet there is referring to action planning can bring together individuals who are knowledgeable in the area of work. All right, so they're experts in that field. All right, number 3, it clarifies the objectives. So the bullets stating the emphasis of a project will change depending on the objective, and action planning provides the opportunity to clarify exactly what change is required. All right, number 4, it allows consensus. All right, so some of these statements, the answers, you could possibly include some other word that might be appropriate for that one. This one most certainly is one of those. Everyone involved can contribute their ideas and gradually, through discussion, negotiation, and compromise, reach consensus. Okay, number 5. Let's have a look at number 5. It's what encourages ownership and accountability. So this ownership allows for tasks to be allocated to different people, creating accountability. Right? Very important in the working environment that people are accountable and responsible for the tasks that they have been put in charge of. All right, number 6, it clarifies the time scales. Okay, so how long things should take in order to complete. And lastly, number 7, it identifies measures of success. All right, so you're able to see what are your key success factors, what sort of things are required, your key performance factors that need to be taken into account in order to see whether your project or your action plan is successful. All right, so now we're going to have another look at a type of question that could come across. Name or outline the stages of an action plan. All right? So let's have a look at the stages of an action plan. First and foremost, number 1, summary of your vision, mission, long-term goals, and short-term goals. So that's obviously the first thing that you need to put in place so that everybody's on the right page, so that everybody knows what are we aiming to perform or what are we aiming to achieve in the next period of time. The next thing is that you subdivide the structure, the work subdivision structure. So identify what is being done, all right? So that's the main task. Then you look at organizing the plan into manageable phases, all right? We'll have a look at an example of a work breakdown structure, which is referred to here. Number 3, it gives an overview of what needs to be done and who and when to complete it, okay, as well as the expected outcome. So now you're allocating those tasks to individuals, because obviously one person cannot do the entire task. So it's easier to actually split that amongst different people. Number 4, looking at a timeline. Okay, timelines indicating targets and deadlines. Always critical that your staff realize and know when certain deliverables need to be done. Okay, so it indicates the dates, use of series of dates on a linear scale. So you might have come across a timeline in respect to your history subjects or something along those lines, where you've got the years along a linear timeline, whereas in this instance we're looking at maybe weeks or months. What are your aims? What are your objectives on specific dates that will be shown on a linear scale? All right, then we move on to a Gantt chart. So this is something that might be quite new to you. A Gantt chart, use of information about action step map and timeline. So now you're bringing in both a work breakdown structure and a timeline, those sorts of characteristics, into one graphical illustration of what needs to be done. Right, so the last thing that you need to do is develop the Gantt chart, clearly showing the activities that need to be done. All right, so the next thing that we're going to have a look at, that is the stages of the action plan, and note that it could be asked as name or outline. So you might be getting the 1 mark. If it's name, then chances are you will be getting 6 marks for this. Outline, they might ask you to show maybe 2 or 3 of the stages in the action plan, because then that would probably be about 6 to 8 marks. All right, let's have a look at the next slide that we've got there. If we were to identify what these planning tools look like, the first one, a Gantt chart. We're going to go through an example that's in your booklet a little bit later, where you can put together a Gantt chart knowing what needs to be done and when they need to be done by. We'll go through that in depth a little bit later. Work breakdown structure. If we look at a work breakdown structure, that's a simple example that's been given to us. You've got a project, a yard project, and that is maybe you're a garden service and you've come into a particular garden and you've got a few tasks that need to be performed in that garden. As you can see, you need to clean up, you need to cut the grass, trim work needs to be done, prepare equipment, and lastly, trim the hedge. There's even underneath there's subcategories of what needs to be done, and they've allocated time for those particular tasks. For example, picking up the trash and bagging grass have been allocated a certain period of time. All right, the next one you will recognize. This is something that you should have come across before, a timeline. You can see that one has been allocated according to year. All right, and what we will refer to in business studies and when the planning tools, it's often a week or even lower than that, maybe days that are allocated according to a timeline. So you can see how a work breakdown structure and a timeline are put together, and then you are presented with a Gantt chart. All right, so let's have a look at a quick activity. Right, in this activity, you've been given a definition and you are required to identify which planning tool it is referring to. So first and foremost, deliverable orientated breakdown of a project into smaller components. Right, so you should have an idea from our previous explanations what that's referring to. Let's have a look. Okay, a Gantt chart or a work breakdown structure. Okay, so both you'll see a little bit later show how a task is broken down into smaller, easier tasks that can be performed. The next one uses a series of dates on a linear scale, so there should be your clue to indicate the date of completion for each task. A timeline. All right, linear scale, okay, that's on a line, so that's referring to timeline. And then lastly, formal document designed to guide the control and execution of a project, and that's project planning in its entirety. All right, so that's just a little bit of an activity that you should have completed in your book set. We're going to move on to another question which could come up. Outline or explain the project planning steps. All right, so let's have a look at those 6 steps over there. First one, it says, step 1, identify and meet the stakeholders. All right, remembering stakeholders is anybody that's affected by that business. Okay, some stakeholder examples might come to mind: your customers, your community, your suppliers, anybody that's directly or indirectly affected by your business. All right. Step 2 refers to setting and prioritizing those goals. Note that you've met all your stakeholders, so you should have an idea as to what each stakeholder is requiring in this project. So maybe what a customer is requiring is slightly different to what a supplier would be needing in this instance. So that's why we needed to meet up with all those stakeholders and find out what their priorities would be. So step 2, having a look at our slide there, step 2 is setting and prioritizing those goals, okay, depending on what the stakeholders have referred to. Step 3, define the deliverables. What needs to be done? What are the priorities? And then you're going to be looking at step 4, whether you're going to be creating the project schedule. Okay, so you're going to be identifying those deliverables in step 3 and then also allocating timeframes in step 4. Okay, step 5, identify issues and complete a risk assessment. Okay, so you identify some issues that might take place. If you are able to do that, then you could predict as to what you could do in order to overcome some of those issues. So that's where the completing a risk assessment task might come in handy. All right, because you can predict if something happens, what sort of protocols can we put in place? What sort of policies can we put in place to limit the effects of that issue that might come up? So let's say, for instance, that you might predict that there could be a drought or a flood. Then you could put mechanisms in place to try and alleviate or limit the amount of negative effects that could come into play there. All right. Number 6, so step 6, present the project plan to stakeholders. Right, so you've actually gone all the way around from step 1, you met with the stakeholders. Now you're actually presenting the policy, you're presenting the project to those said stakeholders. So they're going to obviously approve your project plans and give you the go-ahead. All right, so that's outline or explain the project planning steps. All right, quite an easy section for marks over there. Let's have a look at the next type of question that could come up. Outline the importance of timelines, Gantt charts, and work breakdown structures. Why are they important? Note that it's got 2 mark allocations there because it is outline. All right, so it helps project managers and project teams to assess the following. Things like how long a project should take. All right, determine the resources needed. Where are we going to get these resources? How much of these resources do we need? Remember, resources, we're not just necessarily referring to raw materials, we're referring to things like financial resources, operational resources, human resources. How many staff do we need in order to perform these tasks? Number 3, understand the dependencies between tasks. All right, dependencies. What do we depend on? Remember, we speak about the 8 business functions. None of them works independently from the other. Okay, the administrative function or the financial function requires the administrative function, and so on. All right.
Mr. Edwards, we can also think of dependencies that certain tasks, if you draw up a timeline, certain tasks cannot be done before others are completed. So they are dependent on the one to be completed before it actually carries on to the next one. So you need to think, for instance, if you plan something like the Matric end of year function, which you guys were supposed to do but can't during COVID, but if you plan the Matric function, you need to think of a different thing. So if you look at your work breakdown structure, there are different activities that need to happen. you've got catering, music, decoration, all of those different activities that need to happen. And one of those could be, firstly, we need to raise funds.
Sure.
We can't buy any of the things that we need for catering. We can't buy any of the decorations before that section is firstly done, and that is fundraising. So many of the tasks are dependent on other tasks to be completed first before you can actually carry on. So that is what you are saying is absolutely correct, but that is also another way to look at dependencies. The one task is dependent on the other before it can be completed.
Yeah, and that's looking at time frames. So something needs, and it often comes down to the financial aspect as well. One of the first things that needs to happen is to make sure that you've got those financial resources in place. All right. The last one, and we're actually going to refer to that quite nicely. You'll see in our Gantt chart that we're going to work on a little bit later, how those dependencies are so important. All right, number 4. The last thing that we will do is plan the order in which each task should be completed to complete the whole project on time. All right, so that's also got to do with the dependencies and what tasks need to be completed before another task can take place. All right. I have been referring to this drawing up of a Gantt chart on a few occasions. So let's have a look. We've got a task that we've been given. Here are all the activities that need to take place. All right. In this Gantt chart, we need to show all of these activities. We need to show the starting date and also the duration. And as we go through this, you'll start to identify what tasks are dependent on the other one in order to be completed. So just looking at that, you'll see that there's a couple that need to be, so for example, the painting needs to be done after the windows and the gutters have been put in place. All right? The construction of foundations can only be done after the site work has been put in place. So let's have a look. This is what you'll see. I'm going to go back and forth between the two exercises or the two slides just to illustrate this to you. So those are the tasks that we are required to perform. So we've listed those along the left-hand side. All right. The duration, okay, we've entered that under duration in the column duration, and we've also got the start and the end date. So now we've got on the linear scale, just along the top there, you'll see we've got all the dates, and you'll identify that those are different weeks. Okay, so week 1, okay, we need to determine the location. So this is what we're going to do. In your books, you can actually use a highlighter to put this together. You would fill in that first week. All right, so that's showing that before anything happens, any of the other 8 or so different tasks, 8 different activities, the first thing that needs to be done is determining the location. All right, once that's done, then you can start looking at the site work. Okay, and as you can see, on the 8th of March, we can start the site work, and that's also been allocated 1 week to complete. So all the efforts need to be put in place in order to complete that site work within that week. If it's not done within that week, you can see how there's a ripple effect, a domino effect across all the other stages because they're dependent on that activity being completed. All right. Once that's done, then we can move on to the construction of the foundation. And we've allocated 2 weeks for that. That's the 15th of March to the 29th of March. Okay? Once that's done, then we can look at building outer and inner walls. And as you can see, this is quite a lengthy process. From the 22nd of March to the 3rd of May, allocated 6 weeks. All right. Now, notice that this ends on the 3rd of May, but it's not dependent, or you'll see the next one, concrete slabs, is not dependent on the building outer and inner walls being completed. You can actually start that on the 19th of April. All right. The same can be said with regards to the windows and gutters. Also, not dependent on the outer and inner walls being built. Okay, you can start that as you're going along. Then we move across to the electrical appliances or the electrical wiring that needs to be put in place. Also can start on the 19th of April. The plumbing can start on the 19th of April. Roofing, okay? Roofing could have started a little bit earlier. Okay, so as you've got the outer and inner walls built, then you can actually get going with the roofing, okay, with that ending on the 26th of April. Okay, as you're going along, you can start the painting. And you can see now we're moving on to the 10th of May. 4 weeks have been allocated to that. All right. Last but not least, and for obvious reasons, the quality assurance and signing off of the project can only be done once the entire project is complete. It's no point having people coming in checking the quality of the work if it's not done. All right, so that's why the final one, we have the quality assurance and signing off of the project allocated 1 week on the 10th of May. Okay. Right to the 17th of May. So you can see how useful that can be. You present that to all your stakeholders. They know what's required of this project as a whole and also in its small little bits. And what can also happen is each of these tasks can be allocated to individuals or teams that need to complete these particular tasks. You can look at the electrical and plumbing and roofing aspects. Those are all done by professionals, and they would bring in their team of professionals in order to complete that task.
Mr. Edwards, I always say to my grade 11s, of course, these things and Gantt charts are used by businesses all over the world, and it's very modern. In fact, you can actually go onto the internet and you can buy programs that draw up Gantt charts for you. So it's not something that the curriculum writers have just sucked out of their thumb. But it's also incredibly useful because it's useful for small things as well. So for those of you that are going to be in leadership next year or are going to plan projects and things that you do for school, this is a very valuable thing to put up, and it's very visible, and it's everybody knows exactly what they need to do. It's an incredibly useful tool to organize, because I've seen with my projects, sometimes when I was graded for grade 12, it sometimes go awry because people are all doing the same thing, and this makes it a lot more organized if you work according to this.
Yeah, and one thing that Mr. Van Zyl referred to there was the online tools that we've got available to us. I mean, you can do this sort of thing manually, but these days there are fantastic project management tools that you can find online. A couple that come to mind. You've got Microsoft project management systems. You've got Monday.com, which is great for businesses, and if you're wanting to allocate staffing tasks and that sort of thing. Very, very useful tools. And no doubt, when you guys are getting into the working environment, you'll come across many of these tools, and you'll see how useful they can be. All right. Okay, so that brings to the end of that section of work, the transferring of a project plan or business plan into an action plan. A couple of tools that we've come across there, Gantt chart and work breakdown structure. The next section that we're going to look at is actually setting up or starting a business. So, as you can see, apologies, there you go. There's on the right-hand side, that's a business type environment. Doesn't matter how big or small your business is. You've got to start somewhere. So that's many of the very, very businesses that have done really well. Apologies for that. Many businesses out there that have done incredibly well started off in their garages. One of the things that we've come across is Apple and the likes of Amazon, where they have started their businesses from their garages.
In fact, Microsoft as well.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter how small you are, it is necessary to actually start somewhere. So we're going to have a look at that. Okay, the types of questions that you can come across in this section of work. So firstly, state 3 aspects that must be considered when initiating a business. Okay, firstly, strategy, operations, and productivity. All right, so notice the verb that's used there. All right, so this is now training you for the paper. State. All right, so state will tell you that it will be a 1 mark per statement that you've made there. All right, so that one would be 3 marks.
Mr. Edwards. Also, I will be discussing it later in the program. I'll give them a good example. If you see there, it says state 3 aspects. You can state 4, but the marker will be instructed to only mark the first 3. So let's say your first 2 is wrong, but your bottom 3 is correct. You're not going to get 3 out of 3. You're only going to get 1, 2. Your first 3 is wrong. You get no marks.
Yeah, no, definitely keep that in mind. We will, as you can see, we're going through some of these assessment type tips that you need to keep in mind. All right, so let's have a look at the next question that could come up in this section of work. Outline aspects that must be considered when initiating a business. All right, so as you can see, outline being the verb, you've got the 2 marks at the end of the statement. The strategy looks at how you will achieve your goals. This includes an action step chart to outline the vision, goals, and action plan. These must be used to develop the system and processes for the business to achieve its outcome. So those are the types of answers that you'll be required to provide. And as you can see, I mean, there's numerous examples of answers there, but you would probably, at maximum, be required to provide 4. Okay, so that would result in an 8-mark question over there. All right. The next type of question that you could come across is explain, discuss 3 aspects that must be considered when initiating a business. So you can see in this one how it differs from the first one that we've got right at the top, where it says state 3 aspects. Now we're talking about explain 3 aspects. And the mark allocation will be considerably different. The first question, state, was for 3 marks. This one could be upwards of 9 marks. Okay, so you're going to be provided 2 marks for each of those aspects that you've included. All right, and then because it's explained, you are now requiring to provide further information. So let's have a look at the first one. It says strategy. You get your 2 marks there. The strategy looks at how you will achieve your goals. Okay, so that's just elaborating on that aspect. The next one, operations. Okay, the business and action plans identify the operation plan. All right, and you've got the 1 mark. So you're already at about 6 marks for this question. All right, so keep that in mind. Again, coming down to the verbs that's being used in the question. Okay, one thing that you could remember, just a little tip for remembering these types of questions, a little acronym over there. If you some people remember it's a little bit easier this way. SOP, strategy, operations, productivity. All right, so again, just a little recommendation over there. The next one over here, looking at factors that must be considered before startup. Note that it says before. And again, we've got a nice little acronym there, BECCC. So obviously the B will be referring to business growth. Then the E, environmental changes. Then you've got your 3 C's, culture of the organization, customer services, and cost saving. All right, let's have a look a little bit more in depth with regards to culture. Looking at staff must become familiar with what is acceptable and what is not, dependent on the business itself. Some businesses, the culture would be slightly different. Some businesses, you're required to wear a tie. Others, it's not necessarily the case. It's not as formal, depending on what is considered professional in that environment. Okay, so the culture could be slightly different. Right, then we move on to environmental changes. Note that environmental changes, usually when we're referring to environmental, we're looking at external and internal. Internal, okay, you're looking at your strengths and your weaknesses. Okay, if you remember the SWOT analysis. Strengths and weaknesses are your internal aspects, looking at your employees, your strategies, your management style, that sort of thing. And then external would be your opportunities and threats. Okay, those are always referred to as external. Okay, things that you don't necessarily have control over. Okay, things that you might be able to identify an opportunity. Okay, a threat like the drought or a flood that takes place, or economic changes that you don't have control over, but you need to be able to adapt to it. All right. Then we look at customer services. Okay, customer services, for a business to be successful, customers must be given what they want. Okay, so you're going to be doing analysis of your market. Okay, making sure that you are ticking those boxes. You're making sure that your customers are happy. You're providing them with the relevant services that they require in order to be satisfied, and also to ensure that they are loyal to your business. All right, so that is the customer services. Then we look at business growth, determining if the industry is predicted to grow or decline. All right, might look at how you're doing your business. Okay, if the business is not necessarily seen to be growing, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. How can you diversify in order to take advantage of some other opportunities that may be out there? Okay, several businesses have had to do that over this pandemic lockdown period, where they've had to start looking at different avenues of actually providing a service. Okay, unfortunately at the moment, many businesses, there isn't an opportunity to grow. But there is, for example, online retail. It's probably one of the biggest growing entities at this moment because of the lockdown situation and what's it's provided to us. Right, so in that instance, there's an aspect of growth probability. Okay, lastly, cost saving. How can we save costs? Because if you can save costs, then you can possibly transfer that onto your customers, so you can provide a cheaper product. Or, if you're saving on costs, it means that you're going to be possibly making more profit. Again, in the end, that's part of the reason why we're in business. It's part of the reason why investors want to invest in your business, because they want to be paid out at the end of the financial year. All right, so cost saving can be very, very important. Ways in which you can do that: you look at buying used equipment, starting your business from home. Okay, as we referred to earlier, the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Apple. There's all these stories of how these businesses started at a very, very small level, and look at the absolutely incredible corporations that they've become, and real money spinners at this time. All right, maybe you're looking at identifying suppliers where you can have a good relationship with them and you're able to negotiate. Okay, maybe you're wanting to buy in bulk. Okay, so there's certain ways that you can save on costs in that respect. All right, so that's factors that must be considered before startup. All right, a type of question that can come up in this section: explain or discuss reasons why businesses need funding. Okay, any business that starts out requires some sort of financial resource. All right, so let's have a look. The reasons to start a business. Obviously, that's one of the main reasons for funding: to finance expansions to production or capacity. Maybe you've started out small, but you've realized that this business is actually going to be successful. But in order for it to be viable and feasible, you would need to actually upscale, start producing slightly more products. Okay, and a way in which you can do that is in order to actually have financial resources to expand your equipment and your machinery. Maybe you need a bigger warehouse in order to make it viable. Okay, to develop and market new products. So maybe you bring in a new product for your particular business. Okay, so that you can broaden your market. Next year, we'll actually be looking at different aspects product development and market development, looking at different ways in which you can increase your sales and increase your production into different markets. So keep that one in mind for next year. Another one is to enter new markets, as I mentioned, right? Taking over or acquiring other businesses. Okay, an example here: Takealot bought out Kalahari.net. Right, Kalahari.net had been around for years, and Takealot came over, and they did very well. And because they had the backing of other financial resources, they were able to buy out Kalahari.net, and now they're basically a combined business. So that would be an example of takeover or acquisition. All right, moving to new premises. As I mentioned earlier, maybe you need a bigger warehouse in order to store the products that you're wanting to sell. Some areas in Cape Town are very much known for the large warehouses, the likes of ShopRite and Macro, where they're storing all their produce or their products. Okay, the last one, to pay for the day-to-day running of the business, to pay your salaries, to pay other suppliers as well. Right, so that might be something that is obviously very important. You cannot afford not to be paying your employees for sure. All right, so on that note, we're going to look at different sources of funding. Okay, so here are 4 different sources of funding that we will come across. So first and foremost, overdrafts. We'll start on the right there, overdrafts. It might be a concept that you've come across before. Okay, basically it is if the bank allows you to borrow money on your check account. So the example that I always use in class is if you have 2,000 Rand in your bank account and you have been given a 10,000 Rand overdraft, it means that you'll have 10,000 plus your 2,000 Rand available. All right. The issue here is that the banks are not going to do it for free. That's for sure. Okay, so the overdraft will be charged interest if you are using it, and also that you are charged in order to use your overdraft. Okay, so it can be very useful for instance if you're low on cash flow and salaries need to be paid. Very important that salaries are paid on a monthly basis, but you might not have your income as yet, so overdraft can be used there.
Also, a nice example there, Mr. Edwards. Let's say a business has a good deal coming and you want to take hold of, let's say, a special that they run, and you know that I'm going to sell these items in a very short space of time, but I just don't have the funds to buy the stock that I need to take hold of the opportunity. The bank will allow you to spend more money than what you actually have in your bank account, and once you sold the items, you pay it back, and then all problems solved. So that is basically how an overdraft works. It's a very, very useful tool if you pay it off.
Yeah, for sure. So it is very useful, but it can be a little bit of a dangerous situation if you are unable to actually pay it back on a monthly basis. All right, related to that and slightly different is a bank loan. All right, a bank loan is where you have been given a specified amount, okay, which you're going to be repaying over a specified period, repayments on a monthly basis. Over and above that, you will be paying interest on that bank loan. Right? These can be short to medium term or even long term if you're looking at a home loan or a mortgage bond, as it's commonly known as well. Okay, so that can be over a 20-year period, or it's something that you can be paying over a 5-year period, depending on what you're needing it for as well. Okay, vehicle finance is also an example of a bank loan. Where you would purchase a vehicle and then you'd pay it over 5 years, 60 months, for example. Okay, so that is bank loans. Then we start to look at different aspects where people are going to invest in your business. Okay, first and foremost, we'll go to venture capital. That's in the top right-hand corner of your slide over there. All right, so venture capital is where someone is going to invest in your business, normally a startup. So it's a new business with a great idea, great business plan, and they're going to invest in that business. As you can see there, you've got a little circular pie chart, and they have invested approximately a quarter of your business. So they would take 25% of ownership of the business. They're not going to be doing that for free, though. They're going to expect a part of your profits to be paid out.
It's normally for many of these guys, if you've watched Shark Tank before or Dragon's Den, that is actually venture capital.
100%.
That's exactly what that is.
Okay, so they're not doing it for free. They're identifying an opportunity where they're going to get some sort of return. So they would allocate maybe a couple of 100,000 or R1 million or something like that, with the intention that they're going to get a return on that investment. All right. Angel funding is slightly similar, where you've got wealthy entrepreneurs. They've identified different businesses that are already doing well. So that's the main difference between venture capital and angel funding, is that venture capital is normally startups, whereas angel funding could be a business that's doing quite well, and a wealthy entrepreneur has identified that it's a good opportunity to make some money. All right. Again, they're going to expect a return on that. And that's usually paid out via dividends. All right, remembering dividends, which we'll discuss a little bit next year in grade 12 in investments, is a portion of the profit that needs to go to shareholders. All right, so that's overdrafts, bank loans, venture capital, and angel funding. These days, you've also got other opportunities for sourcing of funding, like crowdfunding and that sort of thing, which are becoming more and more popular because you're able to gather a great deal of investments that way. All right. So what sort of factors need to be looked at when deciding on the choice of funding? So let's have a look. Firstly, the amount of capital that you need, okay? That could determine the length of period that you are going to be requiring this money or paying back the money. So long-term finance will be paid or repaid over a longer period and include bank loans, things like hire purchase, and also home loans, for example. Okay, you won't see overdraft being a long-term investment. Okay, things like home loans will be a longer period of time. All right, then looking at risk. So what sort of risks are involved in the business? You need to evaluate what sort of risks could come about if you are loaning or borrowing a certain amount of money. Okay, then the cost of finance. So often when we refer to the cost of finance, we're talking about the interest that is allocated to that fund. Okay, one of the things with a home loan, for example, the first couple of years of a home loan, okay, when you're paying it back, is actually paying back the interest. Okay, it's only after maybe year 5 or 6 that you actually start paying off the capital, right? Which is not so nice to think about, but it's part of the cost of getting that finance from the financial institution, the bank. All right. The last thing that you need to look at is the nature of that finance, right? What sort of things need to be taken into account? What sort of information do you need to provide in order to be approved for that sort of finance? All right, so those are the factors that influence the choice of funding, because it's not necessarily the case that you will be approved for a particular type of funding. Okay, you might need to have a look at different options. People also look at different banking institutions. They're not going to decide on the first bank that they go to. All right, moving on. This is the last section that I'll be doing with you. Okay, so we've just moved from this section to presentation of business information.
Sorry, Mr. Edwards, just before you continue with presentation of business information, I think it is very important to note here that the other topics that we've done, entrepreneurial qualities, the turning a business plan into an action plan and starting a business venture based on an action plan, those 3 topics are actually only grade 11 topics. But this one is particularly important because it carries through to grade 12. It's a very easy section of work to do. There's a couple of things that might catch you out later on, but if you know this section of work very well, then you are quite set for an easy section of grade 12 work, and that is Mahala marks, for a business venture paper. So this is a really, really important section actually for grade 12 as well.
Yeah. And keep in mind, when we're referring to the presentation of business information, is that you're also at school level required to perform orals. You're required to present. In business studies, you might have done that in term 2. You might have had to present to a class. So these are some of the tools that can be used, some of the tips that can be used in order to make a real success of your presentation. So keep these ones in mind. Right, so let's have a look.
Edward, sorry, I'm now off the point, but I think this is just very important, and maybe it's a nice point of discussion. For those of you that are very ambitious, this is the one area in your life as a working person where you will get a chance to be spotted. People that are good with presenting business information are the ones that are normally seen by the people that employ them, and that is how you get your career going. So to develop a good skill in terms of presenting information, especially verbal skills, is going to be very important in your career. So it's just something to consider. So whenever you get an opportunity to present, that is something that you need to rather develop and not shy away from.
For sure.
Because this is very important career-wise.
Yep. And I mean, instinctively, you talk about a presentation, you talk about an oral in English, and people don't like doing it because they're doing it in front of people and they feel like they're going to be judged. But as Mr. Van Zyl says, is that it's a critical skill, and it can make or break an interview. It can make or break a presentation to a board of directors. And yeah, as much as we don't like doing presentations in front of people, we're selling the ideas all the time. We're selling ourselves in an interview, and these are some skills that can come in useful. All right, so let's have a look at the importance of presenting business information. So this is a first exercise that's in your booklet, and we will broaden on these topics as we go through this section of work. So we are going to, this is fill in the gap over here. So the first statement, presentations are important because they are used to validate business information. Okay, so you use these sorts of graphical illustrations to make sure that you are selling your idea and people, it's a way of validating that you are understanding, or that people are understanding your point of view and what you are presenting. Bearing in mind, guys, just with regards to this section of work, you might come across a word that might fit in more appropriately, but these are some examples that might be appropriate in this instance. Okay, moving on to the next one. It is essential for business-related information to be presented and validated effectively. Okay, it's professional. The word that hasn't been used here yet is professionalism, all right? So the more professional you can come across, the more validation that you'll have, and people will buy into your idea that much better. Okay, the next one, the information can be presented verbally or non-verbally. Later on, we'll look at the difference between the two. And it's often a question that's given in the assessments, distinguishing between your verbal and your non-verbal business presentations. All right. The last one that we'll look at there is effective validation. Can be done through the proper use of graphs, tables, diagrams, illustrations, and other appropriate visual aids. All right. So there's a list of quite a few there: graphs, tables, diagrams, illustrations. Yeah, but there might be some others that we do not go through that might be appropriate in this instance.
Mr. Edwards, the word validate, being an Afrikaans-speaking person myself, I sometimes find it very difficult to translate. Would I be correct to say that validate means to make truthful or to show that it is truthful?
Yeah, I think that would probably be,
or
validate in the sense that you are ensuring that it is correct.
Okay? It is correct. Yes.
You're backing up your statement. You're validating your statement.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
All right. As I mentioned earlier, a question that often comes up is differentiate or distinguish between verbal and non-verbal presentations and give examples for each. Okay, so first and foremost, verbal presentation refers to the use of speech by the presenter to convey a message to stakeholders. So that's pretty much what we're doing now, but we're also using non-verbal aspects, illustrations, graphs, and that sort of thing. So as soon as you're using speech in order to get your message across, then you are using verbal presentations. Okay, then non-verbal presentations refers to the use of written words to convey a message to stakeholders. So you're not doing it via speech, but you're providing it in the written word. So that could be a business report. It could be a slideshow that you're using, just like we're using today. It could be anything that is given to your audience in order to provide further information. All right.
Mr. Edwards, just to go back to when you have to differentiate between two things, I don't want you to get flustered when you see a mark allocation of 4 marks. And in that case, I know that there's actually only one difference, and that's it. But now it's 4 marks. So I need to have 2 differences. When it comes to differentiation, one difference will give you 4 marks. Because if you look at that, the verbal presentation refers to the use of speech by the presenter, 1 mark. To convey a message to stakeholders, that's only the first definition is already 2 marks. Now we go to non-verbal. A non-verbal presentation refers to the use of the written words, 1 mark, to convey a message to stakeholders. So you guys can see that would be the second mark. So if you put those 2 things together, it's 4 marks. One difference is 4 marks. So always remember that, because there's many things that ask you for differences and the mark allocation is only 4. If the mark allocation is 4, we are looking for 1 difference.
All right. And notice that we are looking at the difference between the points. All right. So make sure that they're related to each other and they're showing the opposite to each other. So you can see that in the example that we've given there, the verbal and the non-verbal aspects. All right. Now, let's have a look at the types of visual aids that can be used. And when you're looking at this, guys, have a look at the types of technology that are being used these days. I mean, you can look at Excel, spreadsheets, you can look at PowerPoint. All of these tools can be used in order to, again, validate the information that you've been providing to your audience. Okay, so let's have a look. Firstly, we've got a table. Tables very useful when you're comparing information. Okay, but as you can see in that example, you've got the different costs or sales figures of grocery store between January, February, March, and April, and then the types of foods. Okay, so it's quite nice to compare there, but you might be thinking, well, maybe there's a different way of actually showing that piece of information. Okay. This is another one, pie chart. Okay, notice that in this pie chart, it's a sale of gold in rands, but notice how they've got everything in a percentage. Right, so they've got the keys along the right-hand side there, 2015 through to 2019. Okay, and those keys are related to the particular color in the pie chart. Okay, so straight away there you can see that 28%, or the light blue, okay, which is referring to, I think it's 2016 or 2017, you can see how that takes a big chunk of that pie chart. So straight away it validates your argument that in 2017 the sale of gold was that much more than in other years. All right, so that is the pie chart. Okay, now you've got a line graph. Okay, sale of gold in rands. Again, you can do a comparison throughout the years, and straight away there you look at that, and you can see that 2017 was far higher to the other years. Right, and also obviously in that example they have included the amount 275 million over there. All right. Next one is a bar chart. Again, same information, just provided to you in a different manner. This is very useful when you're looking at comparisons. So that's when I was referring to the table earlier, and how you might have identified a graph that might be appropriate for that table. You might have been thinking about a bar chart. Okay, so a bar graph, very, very useful, and straight away an audience can see. Okay, 275 million, 2017. 2017 was a good year for gold sales in South Africa. All right, so that's the bar graph or bar chart. Okay, next one that we can see is a flow diagram. Straight away you can see how the movement of the tasks takes place. Okay, and again, looking at the dependencies, what needs to be complete before moving on to the next section. Okay, so that's a flow diagram. Again, also very useful for an audience to see the flow of the tasks that need to be completed. All right, moving on to a type of question that can come across. Okay, explain or discuss how the presenter must prepare the following visual aids. Right, so looking at transparencies, slides, posters, and handouts. There we've got the images that come to mind. If you're looking at a transparency, okay, very useful, or slides for that matter, very useful. You can use keywords. Very important not to have too much information on these slides. Only use slides to enhance what you're saying. Remember, the focus must always be on the presenter. Okay, the slideshow should not be a distraction to the audience. Okay, it always should enhance the information. If we're looking at posters, posters are generally used to advertise, to emphasize or remind the audience. Okay, certain requirements, it needs to be bold, it needs to be eye-catching, so that it would ensure that people want to find out a little bit more. Okay, so things like when you're driving along the road and you see some of the posters that are on the lampposts. Okay, it's very important that they're creative, they're bold, they're eye-catching, so that you want to find out more. It's not essential to have all the information on those posters. It's essential that it's gathering that interest, so that the reader that's driving past, for example, wants to find out more, and then they can maybe go and find out a website that has further information. All right. The last one is the handouts. Okay, handouts is a summary of a presentation. What often happens is people will hand out a set of slides, a printed out set of slides. That's maybe not appropriate because it doesn't provide as much information that would be required. So a handout is a printed document that you would be able to provide with your slideshow and your presentation. All right, so it's, again, validating the information that you have presented in your presentation. Okay, there'll be an exercise in your book looking at factors that the presenter must consider when preparing a presentation. Note that I have put before in brackets over there. We look at assessments quite often, some of the end-of-year exams, even at the end of grade 12. There's an issue that often comes up is we've asked for what needs to happen before a presentation, and often the learner will provide information that should be done during a presentation. Okay, so note there's answers that need to be provided before, during, and also afterwards when you're required to provide feedback. Okay, so there's 3 sections to this type of question. Okay, things that need to be done before, during, and after. So just keep that in mind when you're answering this question in a paper. All right, so let's have a look at the questions that have been given to you there. The statement, the first one, be clear about the purpose of the presentation. Okay, people want to know what the purpose is, why they're sitting in front of you as an audience. All right, so then the next one, write down a list of the important information that you want to share with your audience. Okay, number 3, ensure the main aim of the presentation is captured in your opening statement. So again, your audience knows why they're there, and then you've maybe sparked some interest there. Familiarize yourself with the content of the presentation to ensure a smooth flow of the presentation, so you know what is coming next, so you can prepare yourself, and so it's a seamless process. Okay, number 5, be familiar with the background of your audience so that the presentation speaks to their area of interest. And also, if you're talking about something that's quite technical, you don't want to be using too much jargon. All right? Jargon would be your technical type of words that maybe not everybody would be aware of. Okay, so most certainly if you're talking to a bunch of doctors, you would be pitching your presentation at a slightly different level to if you were talking to a whole lot of teenagers or students. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're looking at your audience, making sure that you've put your presentation together in such a way that's easy for them to understand. All right, the next one, formulate a rough draft of your presentation. Okay, a rough draft so that you can go through it and make a couple of amendments and changes where necessary, and then you can complete your task of the final presentation that needs to be submitted. All right, next one, summarize the main points of the body in your conclusion and link your conclusion to the initial purpose of the presentation. Okay. Includes visual aids that will enhance your presentation. Note that we used this word enhance earlier. Make your presentation that much more interesting. So again, visual aids should not be the main focus of your presentation. They should be there to enhance, improve your presentation, make it that much more interesting to your audience. The next one, practice the delivery of your presentation to ensure that you do not exceed the time allocated to you. So yes, practice so that you don't go over time, but also to ensure that you're comfortable with the content. All right, so that you know what your presentation is all about. Okay, and then lastly, prepare yourself for possible clarity questions that your audience may ask after the presentation. In many respects, you can almost predict or forecast what types of questions may come up in your presentation. So keep that in mind and prepare some answers beforehand so that you have maybe some backup information, statistics that could, again, validate your argument. All right. Types of written information. Okay, so business reports on the left-hand side. It's a narrative, graphic, and tabular form. Okay, business reports are often with the learners. This is part of the reason why we ask you to put your business studies essays into that particular format, because in many respects it's quite similar to what you would be expected to put together in a business report. Bullet point form, introduction, conclusion, body. So a business report is often in that sort of format. All right, next one is a business plan, a written document describing the nature of the business, the sales and marketing strategy, and the financial background. There's some other information that you could include to a business plan, and it's something that your investors want to see, banking institutions want to see if you're seeking out funding, okay, as we mentioned earlier in the previous section. Information, an informational report provides a summary of information and data found on a particular topic. And then lastly, analysis. Information is researched and collected. Then the report provides an analysis and leads to one or more recommendations. Okay, so those are 4 types of written information. Okay, I'm going to go through the steps in report writing quite quickly. First and foremost, decide on the terms of reference, where you're getting the information from. Conduct research, okay, and conduct that research from different sources as well, okay. You don't want a biased point of view. Write an outline, and related to our previous slide that we had where we were answering different questions, you write a draft, analyze that data and record those findings, and then recommend a course of action and edit and distribute to all the stakeholders. All right, remembering in analyzing the data and recording your findings, nice way to illustrate that is through the graphs and tables that we've been through earlier. Okay, the next one, explain how to respond to questions about work after the presentation. All right, remember I said to you earlier, we refer to what you need to do before, during, and after. Okay, so this is how do you respond to questions. So first one, listen to each question carefully and ensure that you understand the question correctly. Maybe even repeat it to the person and to the audience where necessary. Restate the question for your own understanding to make sure that you, if you are uncertain about the question, so uncertain is the word missing there. Okay, so again, to just ensure that you're understanding what's being asked. When answering a question, it's important that you address the question, not the person. Maybe there's, I missed one there. Respond only to the questions when you are certain about the question being asked. Okay, I jumped a question there. Apologies for that. Number 4, when answering a question, it's important you address the question and not the person asking the question. Maybe it's someone that you know, maybe it's someone that you're not too fond of, and you might show some sort of aggression to that person, but they might have a question that's valid. So answer the question and not focus on the person. Be prepared to acknowledge good questions by emphasizing the value of the question. You can just do that by stating that it's a good question. Number 6, don't attempt to answer questions that you do not know the answer to. Okay, explain this to your audience. If you don't understand something, say you'll get back to them. Okay, you might have a feedback questionnaire that they can fill out, and make sure that you do get back to those individuals that have asked those questions. Maybe you need to do a little bit of research online. All right, the next one, don't be afraid to admit mistakes made during the presentation if such mistakes are mentioned by your audience. Yeah, it might be quite easily offended if someone has pointed out a mistake. It is important that you remain calm when responding to questions and try not to get flustered. And then lastly, refrain from becoming involved in a debate with a person posing that question. It's not necessarily the time for a debate, but it's something that you might be able to discuss later with that individual. All right. So the last thing that we're going to look at is an essay type question for this section. I'm going to go through this nice and quickly because I know Mr. Van Zyl is going to refer to section C type questions in his part of the presentation. A formal method of communicating face-to-face with stakeholders is through business presentations. Presenters have the option of using different visual aids to enhance their presentations. Presenters must consider certain factors before any presentation. Again, that is just a scenario that's provided for you, and now the focus comes into your different points that need to be covered in the essay. All right, outline the importance of presentation of business information, distinguish between verbal and non-verbal presentations, and give examples of each. We've referred to that question earlier. Discuss how a presenter must prepare the following visual aids, posters, and handouts. And then lastly, advise businesses on the factors that must be considered before a presentation. All right, so we've gone through each of those types of questions over the last little while. So let's move on to what the layout should be. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but as you can see, it's got the introduction, then your different subheadings, and then you end off with your conclusion. Note in the left-hand column, you've got layouts, then the analysis marks, and then originality for an example that you have provided. And bear in mind that an example needs to be up to date. All right. We're going to take a quick break now, and then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Van Zyl that's going to take you through Term 4 work, human resource function.